Good afternoon, Backstitchers. I am finally back with day 3. I had to take a rest. My family and we were sick for about 2 weeks. Everything just rotated, flu, and then had to disinfect our house, and it was just blech. Okay. So anyways, we're just going to jump right into it. Today we're going to be doing day 3 of the Edna Sculpt Along, and that is going to be forming her body, making her body. So let's just get right into it. I'm going to go ahead and tilt the screen down, and we are going to get our boards cleaned and make sure our hands are cleaned. And we're going to get started. So we're going to clean our board. And then make sure our hands are clean. Again, if you have any jewelry on, like rings or anything like that, you don't have to. I take mine off because I've nicked clay pieces or put dents in them and not realized it. So now when I work with clay, I just go ahead and take off jewelry. So we got our hands cleaned, we got our boards cleaned, and now we start on the body. So if you look at Edna's reference picture, her body is done in black along with her legs or boots, shoes, or whatever, except for the collar, which is the turnip. But we're going to be working primarily in black, and then we will also be working a little bit in the flesh tone for her arms. So if you look at her basic shape, it's pretty much like a cone. Like if you can see her lines going out. It does flare a little bit at the bottom. But basically, like when I do things, I look at a basic shape. Like here in this picture is like a square. Her nose is like maybe like an oval. And then you just adjust to your preference from there. So again, without her arms or anything like that, she's basically, her body is a cone with a top cut off. So that's what we're going to be working on today. So we have your black clay. We're just going to cut a chunk off. And I would say if you look at your brick, you have like the little score lines for her body. We're going to cut into one of those lines, full line, and then we're just going to start working the clay, and I just roll and then squeeze. Now, what I do for her body is I will roll it into a ball. After you get you can tell that it's not ready to work with because it's still pulling apart where you folded it on each other. once you start. Okay, so now it's ready. It's more pliable. It's I folded it on each other and I was able to make a ball with no seams. So that's what we're going to start. You're going to roll your clay and work with it until it feels softer. And you're going to roll it into a ball. Then after you get it in the ball, roll it out into a cone. Now you can lay it down on your table and working with one side of the ball. You can work it like that. So if you look at the bottom, it's still rounded. Well, obviously we don't need that, so we can just start working it. Pushing it down. Getting it to the size and shape that you want. Hold on, let me grab Edna's head. So here's our head for Edna, and if you hold her head up to the clay that you just worked, for me, her body's a little bit big. And like I said, this is all trial and error. So what you can do is instead of starting over, slice the bottom part of her body off. And you get what this is about how big the original looked. Let's see. And then slicing off to where I prefer, how big I prefer her body. This is what it looks like. So if you take her head, if you give me a couple of seconds, I'm gonna go, since we're working a lot in black today, I'm gonna change into a white t-shirt. So that way there's a little bit more contrast. Give me 2 seconds, I'll be right back.
Hey, go lay down. Go lay down. Go lay down. Move. Holy shit.
Oh, whatever. Okay. Sorry, I'm back. All right, so now you can see her body, and we still have that cone shape and the round bottom, basically. Now in her picture, if you want to just take your fingers, gently press around the edge, it'll give it where the edge is not so rough. Excuse me. You can also push up your edges to kind of make that little flip. If you look at your picture, it looks like it's flipped a little bit. And then if you look, she's got kind of a curve where she's kind of like got that attitude where that curve. So what we can do is just basically bend it, push it like this. I'm sorry, do you want to come here? Come on. Okay. So again, you just kind of bend it, push the bottom up. You got that little flip. All right. Now also, if you look at her outfit, you can see like a little line and maybe like a little hem or a little line or around the bottom of her dress, and then you go up a little bit and you see that line, or in the indented line a little bit up further. So you can take your silicone pointed tool and press in. We're going to make not the hemline, but just the decorative line above that. Just gently push in. You have to go over that same line a couple times just to get the indentation or the depth that you want. See? Now, the bottom of the dress, there's two ways you could do it. You could do the same method we just did, just above, and it'll give the illusion of like a little hem, or, which is the easiest way, or you could take a little bit of black and roll out a really thin strip. And then you take the end off. And then attach it to the very edge. Now you don't want to press it on too hard, because if you press it on too hard, you'll mash it in and you really won't be able to tell, like, the edge. So now that and it doesn't take a lot of pressure to get it to attach. And you could just barely push up to get that little rolled edge look. And where the seams meet, just take your blade, cut the excess off. Take your fingers and just smooth it over a little bit. So now you got your basic of your dress done. Now, we want to decide where we're going to have her head on here. So, what you want to do, take your little body that you have so far, and make sure that this, and again, this is all up to you. If you want to make her body bigger or if you want to make body smaller, that's totally up to you. This is the size that I always like to have the head a little bit bigger than the body. It's just, to me, it's cuter. So what we want to do is we want to, since we're going to be working with a different color, just wipe your hands real quick. Especially working with a skin tone, you're going to, that it doesn't look like, it won't look like it, but there is a black pigment transfer. So make sure you wipe your hands down before you start working with skin tone again. Now, in the top of her dress, you want to make a small hole. And you can start it with your pointer tool. And then take your ball tool and just work it in there. You want to get it kind of, you can see, like, you can't really see any of the silver in there. And that's how we're going to put a piece of flesh skin tone in there. And that's how we're going to connect the head to the body. So if you want to, we'll do that. Actually, we'll do that last. So we got the hole in there. And the reason why I do that now is because we're going to work on the arms, and once we get the arms attached, I don't want to smash the arms. So again, with the arms, we're going to take your black clay, cut a chunk off, and again, I can't, like, you're going to have to use your eyes and judge, like, how big you want your arms. Are they proportionate to the size of your body? And again, proportion in your eyes, because for me, what I like might be different from what you like. You might like a more of a correct size or portion, whereas I kind of like it look, I don't know, I like the look of maybe where the head is a little bit bigger than the body. So again, there's no wrong or right. It's what you feel or how you want your character to look. So I've taken a piece of black and I've rolled it into a ball. I'm going to take that piece of black and I'm going to split it down the middle. The reason why we do that is to try to keep the proportions even, so that way when you do make your arm, you're working with the same amount on each side and they'll be more proportionate to each other. So roll those two into a ball. If you look at her, so you can see like up above her shoulders is more like a poof, where it's thicker at the shoulders and then it tapers down. So what we're going to do is we're going to roll out another cone, or two cones actually. And then put them up against each other so you can see if they're, you know, somewhat similar in shape and size. I like this. So now, again, take your body and you have that flip up, which is more towards the back, like where her butt would be. And then the front kind of angles down, that curve angles down. So her one arm, she's holding one arm like this and then the other tucked up under. So we're going to work on the arm that's tucked up under. And while you're working, you just want to make sure the hole for the neck stays open. We can reshape it and form it once we get done. So to me, that's a little too big. So I'm going to cut the top off. And once I get one done, I can put the other against it and cut the same length. So now it's basically a cone, but you don't want your arms to be just like stuck on there like that. So what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna pinch one side, so you create a angled or a slant. So look, see how it's right here, there's a slant. And that way when you lay it on the body, it kind of forms and it's kind of flush with the back. And then you can take your pointer tool at where the bend of your arm would be, this right here. You could just make a slight crease or score a line. To where her arm would bend. See? Okay. Now, you don't have to. I always do because I just think it's a neater look. On the back of her arm, you'll be able to see where the arm connects to the body. If you don't want to see that seam, you can take your, some people like to use their silicone, like their flathead screwdriver, and they can take the seam and smooth it down. Me, I like using just my finger with a little bit of pressure and just do that until the seam disappears. Or you can take your metal ball tool with a little bit of pressure and just work the seam out. Just keep going over it, over it. Fingers, or you can do a combination of all. It's, like I said, it's totally up to you. Now the seam is gone. Now also working with your clay, your hole might be closing up or being smushed, so go ahead and just reopen that up. Now we have to work with flesh tone for her hands. But before we do that, you're going to take your silicone pointed tool, and at the bottom of her arm, you're going to carefully indent a hole and wiggle it around to make a little opening. Now that skin tone that we made earlier, we're going to take, it's not very big, maybe the size even smaller than a pea. And for this size, we can cut it in half, put half back in there, cut it in half, cut the part that you left out, cut that in half again, roll them into little balls. And then roll it out into a little log, right? Now you can leave it just like that, where it's just a little log, and you can stick that in the hole. What I like to do is actually roll it into a little cone where the end, one end is pointed, and then take your finger, just your two, in the very end, just pinch it a little bit, and it gives a little hand. Now if you want to get really detailed, you can take this and you can score a little line, make a little finger mark, or like little fingers. Now once you have that, you take it, stick that in the little hole. Don't mash it too hard, but you want to get the hand to stick to the body. And that's what that side looks like so far. Now the second side, she's holding her arm like this. So again, we take one side and we pinch to get that little angle. Now you can, at this point, you can go ahead and take and do your little score. I would say like a third of the way up. That little notch. And stick it where the other. And again, very carefully, gently smooth the back. And again, this is if you choose to do it. I just like where the seams are hidden. Do the same thing where you make a hole in the end of her arm, open it up. If you need to, you can at this point reshape. And with your other piece of flesh, you're going to do the same thing where you make one end into the point. Give a little squeeze to the other to make your hand. And yes, I do have the Golden Girls on in the background. Once you've got that, stick that in there. Okay. Now, if you really want to get detailed, you can leave it at this point. But if you look at her picture, at her sleeves, they actually have like little triangles on them. If you can't see it in this picture, the reference picture, you can go on Google, but they look like little dragon scales. Now, if you want to get that detail in there, well, I did. I think my daughter took if you have a little pair of embroidery scissors or like some like thread snips, which she took. Give me a second. I'll just use my thread snips. I know this is like not what you're supposed to do with them, but if you have a pair of like embroidery scissors that you don't use, or thread snips, or from a manicure kit where cuticle, like the little tiny cuticle scissors for your fingernails or your eyebrows, those are perfect size and they have a very sharp tip. You just take the tip of your snip and you don't cut all the way through, but just a little tiny pinch. And you layer them, like, so if you do one layer that is, just use my marker. Like you have 3 right there, then you make your next snips like that. And then your next snips you line up with the ones that you made at top, and it makes those little dragon scale like things. Now, at first, they may seem like they stick up a lot. Like I said, you can see I'm just barely using the tip of my scissors. And you do that all the way down to the end of the sleeve. See? Now, if they stick up too much, just take the tip of your finger and just gently pat to get the pointed ends to stick down. And again, if your hole is closed up, just work it open a little bit more and do the same on the other side or the other sleeve. Again. Okay. So now we got most of our top half done. So now we just want to make that little V. All right, so there you go. And again, you can just to make sure you're keeping your proportions. Just hold the head up to the body. And for me, that's where I want it to be. Now, if you look at your outfit, you have that V right there. It's magenta. So you're going to take your brick of turnip and just slice the corner off. That's all you need. You're just going to work it a little bit in your fingers. Roll it out. Just like that. Now, what might be easier for you to do is if you actually make your V, the V-neck now, which you just pinch a little bit at the bottom, so you make that V. Now hers looks kind of flat, so I'm just going to put a little bit of pressure on and flatten it out a little bit. Now obviously this is like you're not going to be able to get the whole thing on there. If it sticks, you can use your blade to just go under it a little bit. But you want to get your V just and set it where you want it. Right? Okay, so I like where that is, so I'm just gonna just barely push. And then the extra that's up here, I'm just gonna use my blade and just barely push in and then take the excess off. See? So now you got your little V in there. Okay. Now, her legs, which this is where the toothpicks come in. Put your little body aside. Now you're gonna cut off a what's the matter? Yeah. Okay. So you're gonna, and again, if you see, you want to always make sure your blade is clean, because if I take this blade now and I cut where that is, now you have red clay, and even if you wipe it off, there's now red clay in there that is embedded, and you're going to have to cut off. So always make sure your blade is clean. Slice this off. Put it in the scrap pile along with that one. Okay, so cut a piece of black clay off. We're going to roll it into a ball again. Cut it in half. Now, you're going to do the same thing that you did before, where you roll it out and you make a cone. See, about the same size. With this, however, the thick part of your cone is going to be her upper leg. Now, I'm going to score where I also want her foot to be, like where her ankle starts. So if you see that indentation right there, that's the fold where her foot's going to be. So we're going to bend that part up, and it's going to be a little foot, but we're not going to go there yet. So we're going to take our toothpick and we're going to gently, actually I'm going to bend the foot up now so that way I can show you what I'm talking about. So I'm going to go ahead and make the indentation, put them side by side, make the indentations at the same spot on each piece of clay. I am going, and then you're going to squish it a little bit, not as much as the hand, but just a little, just flatten it out a little bit. Push it up. And now if you look, You have her little boot or her little leg. Okay. See? Now, what you want to do now is set your boot like that. I'll do the other one real quick. One leg is going to be longer. That leg that's cocked out a little bit will be, you'll need to roll it out a little bit longer just because to give it that look. Okay. So if this is going to be the leg that is straight, and this is going to be the leg that's cocked out to the side into this. Now your legs should stick to the board. See? I'll turn it around so it's to the back and slanted a little bit. See? Look. So to give it more stability, to get your character to give it more stability and to secure it more to the base, we're going to use toothpicks. A lot of people like to use the like if you're a jewelry maker, you have your pins where you string your beads on. They're long, they kind of look like needles. I don't like to use those because they're made out of metal and they're not very porous. So that way, unless you make the hook at the very bottom and hook it in, there's a really good chance that it's going to slide out of your clay because there's nothing for the clay to seep into and make a bond with. Whereas wood is very porous. So when you go to cook your clay in the oven, when the clay is it's polymer clay, so it's a plastic base. So when it melts, it's gonna melt into those pores and those grooves, and it's gonna latch on. So that's why I use toothpicks. And now again, if you're experienced with using the metal, it's again all preference, but the toothpick is just what I like to use. In clay characters like this. Now, if I were making jewelry and I needed that eye to connect to a necklace or to earrings or something like that, then I would use the metal. So we're gonna take our toothpick or your metal, and you're gonna take your time. Now you can see that if you look, you can see it poking out of the bottom. When it gets to that point, you just want to hold it in your hand and keep kind of like a cork or a screwdriver. And you're going to go about, I would say that's like a third of an, well, I would say half an inch. Give it a half an inch. Okay. You're going to set it down. And then you're going to do the same thing with your other one. Just very gently hold the sides. Take your time because you don't want to get your toothpick and accidentally go out the back or the sides or anything like that. You want to stay in the middle of your clay piece until you'll be able to tell when you twist it it's not going anywhere, so I can tell that it's all the way through. And you just keep going. Again, that 1/2 inch. Now, if you want to make adjustments to your legs or whatever, now is the time to do it, to reshape them. Mine are pretty good, so I'm okay. Obviously, if we keep this part how it is, it's longer, right? So it's not going to work. You just grab your the bottom, and I have these just basic like scissor snips, and I leave about 1/2 inch. I cut it off. So there's about 1/2 inch on each side, or each opening. Now what we're going to do is very carefully, so if you look at her bottom, you're going to find the middle and go out a little bit. You don't want to put it directly in the middle, but you want both of your legs to be centered. So basically, where her hips are on here, where that, you're going to line up with there. And then you're just going to, if you need to, you can use your silicone tool and start the hole. And anytime you're holding your character, you want to be very gentle as you can be, and not smush. So you can start your hole with your silicone point tool, and then just roll it in there. You can also take another toothpick. You got to get that sharp. And do the same thing. Now, I went ahead and put both holes in there so you can see like where they are. Take one boot, then the other boot you're going to go in a slant into the back. Now, the first boot goes in pretty smooth and it's flush with the bottom, and that's because there's no slant to it, right? The other one, which you're not going to be looking under there, I mean, you can if you want it, but you can go ahead and very carefully, if you want to, smooth the edge down to where it joins together with the bottom of her dress. And then if you have to, you reopen the hole. Very carefully lay her down. Now, we're going to take some of that skin tone, you know, that other half of that pea that we cut off. We're going to use that. We're going to roll it into a little log. And it's about maybe like 1/4 inch long. we're going to stick that in there, in that hole. Now also, with doing this, you're going to take your Bacon Bond, the liquid clay. Okay, see you when you get back. Love you. Yeah? Love you. Another tool I find really useful is this tool. It's very sharp at the end. Now, I didn't tell you to get this tool because I know we're a bunch of sewers in here, and you could substitute that. I mean, that alone, like, just to save money. You can substitute it by using just a regular sewing needle. All right, so you're going to take your Bacon Bond, and you're going to put some in that hole. And I fill it 3/4 of the way in that hole. Take your little your neck, and you kind of want to do a little cone at the top again, so it's a peak. Now, if you smashed it down or whatever when you're putting it in the body, you can always just pinch. Set her head in there. Just like that. Now, here's what she's going to look like. She's got a little toothpick sticking out of her legs. Oops. Oh no, her head fell off. Okay. Okay, so on to my next. So now that her body is put together, right? When you go to cook her, you want to put like wadded up, like crumple up some parchment paper, and you're going to lay her on that parchment paper and give her kind of like a bed where it supports, because right now her head is obviously wobbly, but when you go to cook her, you're going to lay her down, and you're going to lay her down like this, where her head, so if you just lay her down like this and her head is tilted back, that's how she's going to stay. But if you take and you put parchment paper down beneath her, like a bed, and you crumple to how you want her head positioned, and you put paper or whatever underneath, her head is going to stay that way. So however you position her head, that's where it's going to stay. Now also, if you look at your reference picture, it is to the back a little bit and off to the side. So when I go to place her on the baking pan, I'm going to lay her down, tilt her head back, maybe put some paper under her back, and then tilt her head to the side. And that's how she's going to cook. When she comes out, it's going to be hard, and that's how it's going to stay. So I'm going to go ahead and pop her in the oven, and we're going to go ahead and bake her. Again, the baking temperature we're going to do at 200 degrees at about, I would say, 10 to 15 minutes. And then your character is pretty much done. When I come back on day 4, I'll show you what she looks like so far. Before we go into making the base, I will go over on like how to touch her up with using your acetone and putting a little bit more blush on her and stuff like that, and then she will be done, and then we'll work on the base. And then day 5, wrapping the base in color around the getting the thread look around the spool, and then Edna will be done. So I'm gonna go pop her in the oven, and thank you for participating in day 3, and I will be back with day 4.